I thought I was alone in the woods, but the moment I saw it a creature with bony legs and eyes that glowed through the suffocating darkness, I realized I was being hunted. And the worst part? It knew I was there before I even saw it. I'd always been the type to crave solitude. The constant hum of city life cars speeding by, people shouting on every corner, the persistent buzz of electronics had a way of grating on my nerves. So when I saw the weekend forecast for clear skies and mild temperatures, I decided to pack up and head out into the woods for some peace. No phones, no distractions, just me and nature. The trail I chose was in a remote part of the forest, a place few people ever ventured. There was a sense of mystery about it, something that had always intrigued me. Rumors of strange occurrences and eerie happenings surrounded the area, but I dismissed them. My mind said I needed to clear my head, to reconnect with something pure and untouched. The drive was long, and the air grew fresher as I left the outskirts of town behind. When I reached the trailhead, I gathered my pack, checked my gear, and took a deep breath of the crisp forest air. There was something soothing about being so far away from civilization. The rustling of the leaves, the distant call of birds, the occasional snap of a twig underfoot, all of it was a reminder that life existed outside of the frantic pace I was used to. The trail wound through dense trees, and soon, the only sounds I could hear were my footsteps and the occasional rustle in the underbrush. I kept walking, knowing that soon I would be far enough from the trailhead to feel truly alone, and that was exactly what I wanted. After a few hours of hiking, I found myself far from the main trail. The trees were taller here, there, branches intertwining to form a canopy that let little light through. The ground was covered in moss, and the scent of wet earth was heavy in the air. I was starting to feel that peaceful isolation I had been seeking, but as I rounded a bend in the trail, something caught my eye. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, was a structure. It was small, wooden, and old, hidden away in a clearing, as if it had been abandoned for years. At first, I wasn't sure if it was a figment of my imagination, but as I walked closer, I saw it clearly. An old, weather-beaten cabin, its paint chipped and faded, its windows dark and empty. I should have turned around. The whole thing felt off. But curiosity got the better of me. The lure of exploring something abandoned, especially in a place as desolate as this, was irresistible. Maybe I was looking for a distraction, or maybe I was just being foolish, but before I knew it, I was standing in front of the cabin, my fingers brushing the rough wood of the door. The silence was oppressive here. No birds, no wind, just the eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. I pushed the door open, and it creaked loudly, the sound echoing through the trees. Inside, the air was stale, and a musty smell filled my nostrils. The floors were covered in dust, and broken furniture lay scattered in the corners. It looked like no one had been here in years. But there was something strange about it. The room was untouched by time in a way that didn't feel natural. A layer of dust covered everything, but there were no signs of decay. It was as if the place had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to step inside. As I wandered further into the cabin, something on the floor caught my eye, an old wooden box half hidden beneath a broken chair. It looked out of place, as if it had been deliberately shoved there. My heart rate quickened. Maybe I had just stumbled upon someone's private space, a place they didn't want anyone to find. But then again, there was no sign of any recent visitors. I knelt down and opened the box. Inside, I found old photographs, some faded, others torn. They were all people I didn't recognize. But one picture made my blood run cold. It was a photo of a group of people standing in front of the very same cabin I was in, but with one key difference. In the background, partially obscured by the trees, was a shadowy figure. I couldn't make it out clearly, but something about the image unsettled me. It wasn't just the figure, but the feeling it gave off, like it was waiting, watching. I closed the box with trembling hands, feeling the weight of the silence press down on me. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled over me, but it lingered. The photographs were odd, sure, but it was the strange presence in the cabin that kept gnawing at me. I hadn't noticed it at first, but now that I was standing there alone, I could feel it. Something was watching me. I quickly left the cabin and stepped back into the woods, hoping that the fresh air would clear my head. But it didn't. As I walked away from the clearing, I felt it again, the sensation of being watched. Couldn't shake the feeling, no matter how fast I walked or how many times I glanced over my shoulder. The forest seemed to close in on me, the trees towering above, their twisted branches, like fingers reaching for the sky. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. The woods could play tricks on you, especially when you're alone, isolated in the silence. But as the hours passed, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I kept hearing the faintest rustle behind me, too soft to be an animal, but too deliberate to be the wind. And when I stopped to listen, the sound would stop too. I convinced myself it was nothing. I was just being paranoid. But every time I moved, I heard it. Again, footsteps, just out of sync with my own. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I quickened my pace, trying to shake the feeling that I was no longer alone in the woods. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I saw nothing but trees, but the feeling of eyes on me only grew stronger. By the time the sun began to set, I was no longer sure I could trust my senses. The shadows had grown long, and the forest had become a maze of half-darkness. I was tired, my legs aching from hours of walking. But the sensation of being followed had intensified to the point where I felt like I couldn't stop, not for a moment. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, or maybe a strange animal. But as I squinted into the fading light, I realized what I was looking at. There in the distance, just beyond a patch of fog, was a figure. It was too tall and too thin, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted. The creature's legs were like bones, too long and too jagged, moving with an unnatural fluidity. Its eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light locked onto mine, and I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare at the thing that had been following. I met through the woods, waiting for the moment it would reveal itself. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The creature's form was shifting, like it wasn't quite solid, but its presence was undeniable. It was watching me, waiting. And I realized with a growing horror that it had known I was there before I ever saw it. I was no longer alone. Panic surged through me as I took a step back, then another. The creature's eyes never left. Mine, its bony limbs twitching, almost eager. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees, looming like silent witnesses to whatever was about to happen. I turned and ran, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the creature was faster. I could hear it behind me, its steps too. Quiet, too precise. And then I heard something else, whispers. Soft at first, just on the edge of hearing, but growing louder with each passing second. The whispers weren't coming from the creature, but from the trees, from the shadows. I tried to ignore them, but the words were unmistakable. Run ... run ... don't look back. It was as if the forest itself had become alive, complicit in the hunt. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that the creature wasn't alone. There were others, hidden in the darkness, watching, waiting. I don't remember much about how I managed to escape. Everything became a blur of panic and instinct, each footstep louder than the last as I sprinted through the trees, my lungs burning with the effort. The whispers behind me grew louder, more insistent, urging me to run faster, to keep going, to not look back. I couldn't think straight. I just had to get away. The forest had transformed into something unrecognizable, a maze of twisting paths and gnarled trees. I could feel the creature's presence closing in on me, the chill of its malevolent gaze like icy fingers on my spine. I pushed myself harder, my heart pounding in my chest, desperate to reach the edge of the woods where I could finally escape. I ran for what felt like hours, the dense trees becoming a blur of dark shapes and twisted, Shadows. I was dizzy with fear, my breath coming in ragged gasps, but the whispers never stopped. They were all around me, coming from the trees, from the ground beneath my feet, from the very air I breathed. And through it all, I could still feel its eyes on me. That terrible, unblinking gaze, glowing through the night like twin lanterns. I don't know how, but eventually I stumbled out of the woods. The trees thinned, and the night sky opened up above me. I stood there for a moment, panting, my body trembling with exhaustion and terror. The creature's eyes, those glowing eyes, were still with me, burning into my mind like an imprint that refused to fade. I could feel them even though I wasn't looking. And back, I had escaped. Or at least I thought I had. I didn't stop running until I reached the trailhead. My hands were shaking as I fumbled with my car keys, trying to get the door open. Once inside, I slammed the door shut and locked it, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. The creature couldn't follow me here. I was safe. Or was I? Eerie. Even as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature's eyes were still watching me. They were etched into my memory, and no matter how far I drove, I couldn't escape them. I knew it hadn't finished with me. It was waiting for the right moment to strike again. The worst part was, I couldn't be sure if I was still being followed. I glanced in my rearview mirror every few minutes, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. But there was nothing, only the empty road behind me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's face, those glowing eyes, its bony limbs. It was in my dreams, too, lurking just out of sight, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to lower my guard. And every time I woke, I felt as though I had narrowly escaped death once more. Even now, weeks later, I can still feel its presence. It lingers in the shadows, in the corner of my vision. Sometimes, when I'm walking alone at night, I can hear footsteps behind me. But when I turn around, no one's there. The creature is still out there, waiting for the moment when I will slip up and wander back into its grasp. I know one thing for certain: it will find me again. And when it does, I don't know if I'll make it out alive. In the days following my escape, I tried to put the woods and the creature out of my mind. I told myself it had been a hallucination, a trick of the mind brought on by exhaustion and fear. But deep down, I knew better. The forest had known me. It had sensed something about me, something that drew it in like a moth to a flame. I tried to avoid the woods, tried to ignore the nagging feeling that something was still there, waiting. But that feeling grew stronger each day. Every time I passed a tree or walked through a patch of shadow, I could feel its presence. The memory of those glowing eyes never faded. It wasn't just the creature that haunted me. It was the forest itself. It was as if the trees had grown, sentient, aware of my every move, watching me when I wasn't looking. The sensation was maddening. It was like the woods were alive, constantly shifting, changing, adjusting itself around me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that the woods weren't just a backdrop. They were a part of whatever evil had pursued me that day. One evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. I took a path I hadn't been down in months, one that wound through a thicket of trees and dense underbrush. But as I walked deeper into the forest, I began to feel that old unease return. The air felt thick and heavy, pressing in on me from all sides. I heard something, a low, guttural growl coming from somewhere deep within the trees. I froze. It was the same sound I had heard when I was being stalked. The creature was back, and it was closer this time. I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest, but the woods had shifted around me. The path that I had walked on just moments before had disappeared, swallowed by the trees. I was lost. The forest had claimed me, just as it had claimed others before me. The whispers began, again, soft and insistent, urging me to stay, to turn back. But I couldn't. The creature was close now, I could feel it. Its eyes burned into the back of my skull as I stumbled through the underbrush, desperate for an escape. The woods were no longer just a place. They were a trap, and I was its prey. The hours stretched on, and I continued to run through the twisting paths of the forest, but it was no use. I wasn't going to outrun the creature. It had been waiting for me, patient and silent, for longer than I could imagine. It had tracked me here, to this place, and now it was waiting for me, to make a mistake. I could feel it watching me, its presence so overwhelming that I couldn't think straight. My breath came in ragged gasps as I pushed forward, the dense forest closing in around me. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal hands, their leaves whispering in the wind. And then, there it was. I caught a glimpse of it, a shadow darting between the trees. My heart skipped a beat. It was the creature, moving silently through the forest, its bony legs unnaturally long and thin, its eyes glowing a sickly green. I froze. It was too close now. I could feel it, its cold breath on my skin, its eyes boring into my soul. The creature wasn't just hunting me. It was feeding off my fear. Every time I looked at it, every time I thought I was safe, it grew stronger. It was only a matter of time before it caught up. Stay with me. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I saw something in them, something beyond malice, beyond hunger. It was a reflection of something darker, something ancient. I realized then that the creature was not just a monster of the woods. It was a part of the forest itself, a creature born of darkness, fed by fear, and bound to the earth for eternity. It had been waiting for me, and now it was going to finish what it had started. As I stared into the creature's glowing eyes, I realized that the forest had changed. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, no wind. The forest was still, as if holding its breath. The creature's eyes seemed to grow brighter, and the air around me grew colder. I could feel my limbs growing numb, my mind clouded with fear. The creature took a step forward, its long, bony legs moving with unnatural grace, and I instinctively took a step back. But there was nowhere to run. The forest was closing in on me. Every path I had taken had disappeared, swallowed by the trees, leaving me trapped in the heart of this nightmare. The creature was no longer stalking me. It had cornered me. The whispers began again, louder this time, echoing through the trees. They weren't just words, now. They were memories, images flashing through my mind. Faces I had forgotten, places I had left behind. The forest was showing me things I wasn't ready to see. The creature stepped closer, its eyes fixed on me. It was no longer just hunting me. It was trying to communicate, trying to show me something dark and ancient, something that had been hidden away for centuries. I didn't know how long I stood there, paralyzed with fear, but in that moment I understood something. The creature wasn't just an entity. It was a part of something bigger, something far older than the forest itself. It was a part of a cycle that could never be broken. Ani stumbled through the woods, my breath ragged, my legs aching, as if every muscle in my body had turned to stone. My mind was a blur, but I knew one thing: I had to keep moving. I had to get out. The creature was behind me. I could feel its presence, closer now than ever before. Could hear its breath, low and wet, like the exhale of some ancient beast, right on my heels. The trees were closing in. The air grew colder, the kind of cold that cuts through you, deep into your bones. There was no more path, no more way forward. The forest had swallowed me whole, and the weight of it pressed against my chest. Every crackling leaf, every whisper of the wind felt like the forest itself was waiting for something, watching. I turned, heart pounding, and saw at those eyes. The same glowing eyes. They were not in the distance anymore. They were right there, hovering in the darkness, shining through the trees. like twin lanterns, cold and filled with hunger. I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The creature stepped out from behind a tree, its form long and twisted, its bony legs stretching. Unnaturally, as if they had been designed to twist and bend in ways no human body could. The skin was pale, almost translucent, stretched over bones that seemed too sharp, too brittle to belong to anything alive. Its face, I could barely look at it, hollow, with no real features, except for the eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. It took a step forward, and I felt my body betray me. I couldn't run. I couldn't even scream. My legs refused to move. I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot by the sheer force of its gaze. Whispers returned, only this time they weren't coming from the trees or the wind. They were in my head, seeping into my thoughts like poison. You are mine now. The words were not spoken aloud. They were felt. Deep inside, they reverberated through my skull. It was too late. There was no escape. The creature moved closer, its eyes glowing, brighter. And I knew it was not just the forest that had claimed me. It was this thing. It was the embodiment of everything evil in the woods. A presence so old, it had never truly left, just waited. In the darkness, patient and still, for someone like me to wander too far. A low growl rumbled from deep within the creature's throat, and my heart stopped. The shadows around me thickened. The trees closed in even tighter. The very ground seemed to pulse, like it was alive, like it had been waiting for me to step into its trap. I took a step back, finally able to move again, but the ground beneath my feet gave way. I was falling into the darkness, into something far worse than I could imagine. My body hit the ground with a sickening thud, and for one horrible second, I thought I was done for. But when I looked up, the creature wasn't there. I had fallen into a clearing, and the air was thick with something wrong. The ground was cold beneath my hands as I scrambled to my feet. I had no idea where I was, but I felt a pressing, suffocating dread, the kind you get when you know that something is far too close for comfort. Even if you can't see it, the creature was still here, watching. That's when I saw it. A figure, a shadow, barely visible in the distance, but this time it wasn't just the creature's eyes. It was standing, waiting, as though it had always been here, waiting for someone else to walk into its trap. And I knew, with every ounce of terror that had yet to fill me, that the nightmare wasn't over. The creature wasn't just part of this forest. It was the forest. It was the darkness, the silence, the waiting. It was everywhere, and it had been watching me from the moment I stepped onto this cursed ground. I turned to run again, my legs shaking beneath me. But something was different now. I wasn't just running from a creature. I was running from the forest itself. Every rustling leaf, every snap of a twig was like the earth itself was hunting me, its branches reaching out to pull me back into its grasp. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let it take me. As I ran, my breath ragged, I thought I saw something in the distance, movement behind the trees, but this time it wasn't the creature. It was something else, something darker, its presence, more oppressive, more ancient. I ran faster, my body screaming for release, but the footsteps behind me were no longer just the creatures. There were more now, many more, a crowd of eyes. Suddenly I tripped. The ground gave way beneath me once again, and I tumbled into an abyss of blackness. I hit the ground with a sickening crunch, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The cold seeped into my bones, but it wasn't just cold. It was alive, moving inside me, pulling at me, squeezing at the air in my lungs. And then I heard it, the final whisper. We'll always find you. I tried to scream, tried to fight, but the world was fading. The darkness was closing in, the weight of it unbearable. The glowing eyes had vanished, but I knew that I hadn't escaped. The creature wasn't done with me. It never would be. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to accept that I would never leave this forest. But as the last of my breath escaped into the silence, I realized the truth. The forest had claimed me, and it would never let me go. Are you sure you're alone as you finish this story? Or is something watching from the shadows? If you dare, share this story. But remember, every retelling brings it closer to reality. Every night, the same creature appears at the edge of my vision, a four-legged beast with gaping eyes in its stomach, staring right through me. It moves silently, its shadow creeping closer with each passing hour. No matter where I go, its presence lingers, and I can feel its hunger. The eyes in its stomach aren't just for sight, they see into my very soul, pulling me toward the darkness. And every night, I wonder how long before it catches me. Every night, I can feel it, the eyes of the creature, watching me from the shadows. It moves, silently, like a whisper of darkness. Its body is unsettling, 4 legs long and muscular, and its stomach is a grotesque void with eerie, wide-set eyes that never blink. At first, I thought it was just a nightmare, the product of my overactive imagination. But as the nights grew longer, it started following me. It began with the small things, unexplained noises in the hallway, the feeling of being watched, while lying in bed. Then I saw it in the corner of my room, its stomach eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. When I closed my eyes, I could still feel those eyes on me, burning into the back of my mind. My once peaceful nights became filled with dread. The creature seemed to know my every move. It never made a sound as it stalked me, always just out of sight. But every time I glanced into the dark corners of my room, there it was, closer than before. It didn't attack or make any aggressive gestures, it simply watched me, its gaze unblinking, as if waiting for something. The more I tried to ignore it, the closer it got. And then came the nightmares. I dreamt of the creature, its long legs carrying it effortlessly across the ground, its stomach eyes devouring every inch of the world around it. In these dreams, I wasn't just a passive observer, I was the one being hunted. The creature would corner me, its gaze locking onto mine, and I could feel myself being pulled towards its stomach, consumed by its stare. The terror grew with each passing night. I tried to fight it off, but there was no escape. The creature knew where I was at all times. Every attempt to run or hide was futile. It was always there, watching. I began to question my sanity. Had I lost my grip on reality, or was there something truly out there, waiting to claim me? One night, I decided to confront the beast. I didn't know how or why, but something inside me snapped. I stood at the edge of my bed, staring at the shadowy corners of my room where it often appeared. My heart pounded, my breath shallow with fear, but I refused to back down. Felt its presence, closer now than ever before. And then it happened. The creature emerged from the shadows, its 4 legs moving gracefully across the floor, its stomach eyes fixed on me. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to look away. The closer it got, the more intense the pull became. I could feel my mind slipping, drowning in its unblinking gaze. The last thing I remember was the overwhelming sense of terror, the creature's eyes pulling me into its stomach. And then, nothing. It stalks me every night. No matter where I go, no matter how far I run, I can feel it drawing closer. The creature, a 4-legged beast with eyes embedded in its stomach, hunts me with an insatiable hunger. At first, I thought it was just a figment of my imagination, a product of stress or fear. But the more it appeared, the more real it became. The first encounter was simple. I woke up one night to the feeling of being watched. I turned over in bed, expecting to see the familiar darkness of my room, but instead, I saw its eyes. Weren't just 2 glaring orbs, they were eyes embedded in its stomach, gazing at me hungrily. It didn't move, but I could feel its stare piercing through the darkness. My heart skipped a beat, and I quickly pulled the covers over my head. When I looked again, it was gone. But that wasn't the last time. Each night it grew bolder. The feeling of being watched intensified. I would hear it moving, its heavy legs thudding against the floor. It never got too close, but I could sense its presence in ever-growing force, watching, waiting. The more I feared it, the stronger it became. I tried to sleep with lights on, but that didn't help. The creature could exist in the light, too. Each encounter felt like a test. The creature never attacked. It just watched, its stomach eyes, following my every move. I began to lose sleep, unable to escape its relentless gaze. Every night felt like an eternity, as if the creature were wearing me down bit by bit, consuming my very will to live. I tried everything to get rid of it, changing my routine, moving to a different room, even leaving the house for a few days. But no matter what I did, it was always there, watching, waiting. Then one night, I realized something terrible. The creature's hunger wasn't for food, it was for something far worse. It was after my soul. The creature's eyes weren't just looking at me, they were studying me, feeding on my fear. The more I feared it, the more it grew powerful. Every encounter, every night of terror, fed its hunger. And I was the meal. I had to find a way to stop it. But how do you escape something that knows you so intimately? Something that thrives on your fear? The hunger never dies, and neither does the beast. It will stalk me until it's had its fill, until I am nothing more than a shell of who I once was. I thought I could outrun it. I thought that if I ignored it long enough, the creature would go away. But the longer I tried to ignore its presence, the stronger it became. The creature, a four-legged beast with eyes in its stomach, wasn't just after my body, it was after something far more terrifying, my soul. The creature doesn't just stalk you from the shadows, it gets inside your head. Its eyes are like portals to another world, pulling at your deepest fears and darkest secrets. Each time it appears, the eyes grow larger, more intense. They don't just see you, they see your soul, your deepest thoughts, your every fear. It knows everything about you, everything you've ever tried to hide. At first, I thought the creature was just a figment of my imagination, something I could forget about if I tried hard enough. But every time I turned my back, I felt its eyes watching me, penetrating my thoughts. I couldn't escape it. The more I tried to hide, the more it seemed to follow me, drawing closer each night. It wasn't just the creature's physical presence that scared me, it was the pull of its gaze. The longer I stared into its stomach eyes, the more I felt myself slipping away, losing myself in its gaze. The fear it instilled wasn't just about what it could do to me, it was the fear of being consumed by it, of losing my very essence to its hunger. Every encounter felt like I was being drawn into a vortex, pulled into the creature's stomach, eyes unable to escape. My thoughts, my memories, all became muddled as the creature's eyes pierced deeper into my soul. It wasn't just stalking me physically, it was consuming me from within. I began to wonder, was I already lost? Was there any way to fight back? I couldn't keep running, but I couldn't stop it either. The eyes were always watching, always pulling me closer to the darkness. The first few nights were the worst. The creature, with its four legs and stomach eyes, would appear at the edge of my bed, its gaze locked onto me. I would try to scream, to move, but my body wouldn't respond. I was paralyzed with fear. I thought I was going crazy, but the longer it stalked me, the more I realized something horrifying. It wasn't a nightmare. It was real. But it didn't just stay in the shadows anymore. As the creature grew bolder, it began appearing during the day. The first time I saw it in daylight, I thought I was hallucinating. But when I blinked, it was still there, its stomach, eyes staring at me, unblinking and hungry. The more I tried to deny its existence, the stronger it became. The darkness no longer had to wait for nightfall, it could follow me wherever I went. I tried to tell people about it, but no one believed me. They thought I was sleep-deprived, imagining things. I tried to explain, to make them understand, but how do you explain a creature with four legs and stomach eyes stalking you when it doesn't exist in anyone's reality but your own? The terror built each day. The creature wasn't just waiting for nightfall anymore. It was a constant presence, always just out of sight but never far enough to make me feel safe. Every time I closed my eyes, I feared it would be there when I opened them again. The night was coming. I could feel it in the air, thick with dread. I knew that when the creature came for me, there would be no escape. And as I lay in bed, wide-eyed and paralyzed, I wondered how much longer until the night would claim me for good. It never makes a sound. That's what terrifies me the most. The creature with its 4 long legs and its stomach eyes moves in complete silence, stalking me every night without a single footstep. I can feel it, though its presence. It's always there, lurking just beyond my line of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. At first, I thought it was just a fleeting image, something my mind created out of fear. But as the nights dragged on, I realized this creature was real, and it was hunting me. It never growls, and never shows any signs of aggression. It just watches, its stomach eyes, following me wherever I go. I tried running, but no matter where I went, I could feel its eyes boring into me. It doesn't need to speak or make a noise. It communicates through its presence. Each night it gets closer, always silent, always watching. And with every passing day, the fear grows. The terror isn't just in knowing it's there. It's in the absolute silence that surrounds it. I never hear it coming, never know when it'll appear. But I always feel it, like an ice-cold hand brushing against my spine. I can't escape it because it never stops moving, never makes a sound. And every night, I wonder how long it will be before the silence becomes unbearable. And I become its prey. The creature came to me at night, as they always do. At first, I thought it was just a nightmare, a terrifying hallucination created by too much stress. But the longer it stayed with me, the more real it became. The creature, a 4-legged monstrosity with eerie eyes set in its stomach, wasn't merely an image from my dreams. It was there when I woke, lurking just out of sight, waiting for me. Its stomach eyes were different. They didn't just see what was in front of them. No, these eyes looked deeper, into something I couldn't comprehend. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, sweat dripping down my neck, and there they'd be, those unsettling eyes, staring through the darkness, watching me. But they weren't just seeing my physical form. It was as if they were digging into my soul. At first, I ignored it. I told myself it was just a figment of my imagination. But the creature became bolder. It would appear at the edge of my bed, watching me silently, never moving. The eyes in its stomach grew larger, more intense, until I couldn't look away. I began to fear that it wasn't just stalking me, it was feeding on me. The more it watched, the weaker I became, like I was slowly draining away with every encounter. There was something inside me that knew, deep down, that the creature wasn't after my body. No, it was after something much more vital, my essence, my soul. The eyes in its stomach didn't just look at me, they fed on me, draining my very being the longer I stared into them. And every time I turned away, I felt more empty, as if a piece of me had been taken. It was subtle at first, but over time I could feel it, those pieces of myself slipping away. The more it watched me, the more I felt like I was losing control. I couldn't concentrate on anything anymore. My thoughts became cloudy, my emotions disconnected. The creature's eyes were constantly pulling me deeper into a dark void, one that seemed to have no end. I felt my will to live slipping away with each passing night. The creature's gaze was not just a physical one. It reached into the deepest parts of me, dragging out my fears, my regrets, every weakness I had ever tried to hide. I tried to fight it, but every time I tried to escape, I found myself drawn back into its gaze. No matter how far I ran, it was always there, watching, waiting. Every time I closed my eyes, I could feel those eyes following me, pulling me toward the darkness. I no longer knew where I ended, and the creature began. It had already consumed so much of me. And then one night, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't just being watched. I was being changed. The creature's eyes weren't just stealing my soul, they were reshaping it. The more I resisted, the more the creature transformed me, molding me into something else, something that no longer resembled the person I used to be. The creature had been stalking me for months, its 4 legs always visible in my peripheral vision, its stomach eyes never blinking. I could feel its presence, like a shadow that hovered just outside my reach, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it was waiting for something. What had begun as an occasional presence in my dreams quickly turned into a daily nightmare. Its silent pursuit wearing me down. It didn't make any sound. The beast was quiet, almost too quiet. Every time I turned a corner, every time I opened a door, there it was standing just out of view, and then it would vanish, only to reappear later. There was something about its silence that made it even more terrifying, a constant reminder that it was always there, waiting. But it didn't attack. It didn't rush at me with fangs bared or claws outstretched. It simply watched, its stomach eyes glowing, and I knew that it was waiting for something, waiting for me to make a move, to slip up. The creature didn't want my body. No, it wanted something else. It wanted something more precious. It wanted my soul. It didn't take long for me to realize the price I was paying for each night I spent in fear. The creature had begun to change me. Every encounter, every moment I spent under its gaze took something from me. My thoughts grew darker. My fears became amplified, consuming me from within. I was losing myself, piece by piece, with every passing day. I tried to escape. I moved to a new city, started a new job, tried to surround myself with people, with noise. But no matter where I went, the creature followed. Its presence was like a shadow that clung to me, growing stronger with every attempt to outrun it. It was as if I couldn't escape its pull. No matter how far I ran, I would always find myself trapped. I began to understand the true nature of the beast. It wasn't just an entity that followed me, it was something that fed on fear, on pain. The more afraid I became, the more it grew, feeding on my terror, on my despair. It wasn't just a monster, it was a parasite, draining my very life force. Every time I thought I had found a way to stop it, the creature only grew stronger. The price for survival wasn't just my body, it was my soul. The more I resisted, the more it took from me, until I was nothing more than a hollow shell, waiting for the final moment when it would consume me whole. I knew the creature was there. It had been there for weeks, every night, silently stalking me from the shadows. I could feel its eyes on me, but I couldn't see it, not at first. It would always appear just before I fell asleep, its presence a heavy weight pressing down on me. I would close my eyes, trying to drift into sleep, but the feeling of being watched would never leave. I tried to ignore it, thinking that it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But as the nights wore on, the creature grew bolder. The shadows in my room began to twist and move, and one night, I saw it. Its 4 legs were thick and muscular, each step a silent thud against the floor. Its stomach eyes glowed faintly, staring at me with a hunger that seemed to go beyond physical need. It was as if it was studying me, waiting for something. But what? I didn't know. All I knew was that I had to get away. I had to escape. I ran. I locked the doors, turned on every light, and barricaded myself inside. But no matter what I did, the creature always found me. Every night, it was there, watching me from the corners of my room. I couldn't understand it. Why was it following me? What did it want? The creature didn't seem to want to kill me. It didn't attack, didn't claw at me with its monstrous limbs. It simply watched, its eyes growing bigger with every passing night. Its gaze wasn't just physical, it was deep, penetrating, as if it was reading my thoughts. I could feel it invading my mind, pulling out every fear, every insecurity, and using them against me. I began to lose track of time. Days and nights blurred together, each one indistinguishable from the last. The creature was always there, its eyes following me wherever I went. The long night stretched on, and I wondered how long I could survive before it drove me insane. I couldn't escape it. There was nowhere to hide. The creature had become a part of my reality, a constant presence in my life. And with each passing day, I felt myself slipping further into its grasp. The creature was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was massive, with 4 long legs, and a stomach that seemed to stretch endlessly. But the most terrifying feature was its eyes embedded in its stomach, glowing a sickly yellow, watching me with a hunger that chilled me to the bone. I first saw it on a dark, moonless night. I was walking home, lost in my thoughts, when I caught sight of something moving in the shadows. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, but then I saw it clearly, a hulking, shadowy figure moving silently through the darkness. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature's eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment I felt like I was being sucked into its gaze. But the creature didn't attack. It didn't rush at me or strike me down. It simply watched, its eyes never blinking. I tried to run, but the creature followed, always just behind me, always silent, always watching. It wasn't until later that I understood the true nature of the beast. It wasn't after my body, it was after my soul. The creature wasn't just stalking me for food, it was feeding on something deeper. It thrived on fear, on despair, on my very essence. Every time I encountered it, I felt a piece of myself slip away, like the creature's eyes were pulling my soul out of me. The more I watched it, the more I began to lose myself. My thoughts became foggy, my emotions distant. It was as if the creature was slowly draining me of everything that made me human. And the worst part? I couldn't stop it. There was nothing I could do to escape its gaze. I was being consumed, slowly but surely. The creature's hunger would never be satisfied until there was nothing left of me. And one night I realized with a terrible clarity that I was already halfway gone, that the soul it was feasting on was no longer entirely mine. I've spent my whole life running. First, it was a nightmare, a shadow lurking at the edge of my vision, whispering my name in the dark. But as the years passed, it became more than just a dream. It became my reality. The creature, with its 4 long legs and stomach eyes, has followed me everywhere. I can't escape it. No matter how far I go, no matter how much I try to outrun it, it's always there waiting. Tonight, I thought it would be different. I thought that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found a way to break free. I thought I could escape the thing that had haunted me for so long. But as I lay in bed, my heart racing with the kind of fear I had learned to live with, I knew deep down that there was no running anymore. I felt it before I saw it, the weight in the air, the oppressive silence that came with its presence. I don't know how long I've been lying here, frozen, too terrified to move. The room is dark, but I can feel it watching me. That terrible, unblinking gaze. The eyes in its stomach. I want to scream, but I can't. It's too close now. I don't know how it got here, how it found me. I don't even remember when it stopped being a nightmare. But I know this much: it's here to stay. And this time, I won't survive. The shadows in my room start to move, like liquid darkness, curling and twisting toward me. The air grows thick, and I feel a coldness that sinks straight into my bones. I hear it slow, steady, breathing in the dark. The beast's 4 legs creak with each step, echoing in the silence. Stomach eyes, wide and glowing faintly in the dark, lock onto mine. I can't look away. I don't want to, but I can't stop myself. I feel the pull, like a magnet drawing me closer, pulling me into the very depths of those eyes. It's not just its gaze. It's something else, something inside those eyes. A blackness deeper than anything I've ever known. The hunger, the emptiness, and the sheer malevolence of it all. I can feel it slipping inside me, taking root in my mind, devouring everything that was once me. I'm losing myself to it. The creature is right in front of me now, close enough that I can feel its presence pressing against my chest, like a weight too heavy to bear. It doesn't make a sound. The silence is unbearable. I'm suffocating. I want to scream, to beg for mercy, but all I can do is stare into its eyes. Then, it happens. The moment I feared. The moment I knew would come. Its eyes widen and I feel myself being pulled toward it, into its stomach, into the nothingness. I try to fight it, but it's too late. I can feel my body growing weaker, my thoughts becoming distant, my soul slipping through my fingers like sand. And just as I feel myself being consumed, something shifts. There's a sound distant, but unmistakable, a whisper, like a breath on the back of my neck. I try to turn, but I can't move. The creature's grip is unrelenting. It's not just taking me anymore, it's taking everything. The whisper grows louder, filling my ears, my mind. It's a voice, but it's not mine. It's familiar, but I can't place it. It calls my name, repeating it over and over, until it's all I can hear. The darkness closes in. And then, just as suddenly, the whisper stops. The silence is worse now, absolute. The beast has taken me, and I am lost to it. But then, as I feel myself fading, I hear something else, something that shouldn't be there. A soft, unplaceable sound, a scratching at the door. I can't see it. I can't move. But I know it's not just me the creature is after. The nightmare will never end. It won't stop with me. The creature will find someone else. It always does. It always will. Do you feel safe as you read this? Or has something already crept into the room with